Coming up next on Arizona Horizon, we'll hear about covering a national convention from a reporter's viewpoint. Also tonight, a new study shows improvements in conditions of the lower Santa Cruz River, and hear about a new study on the economic impact of Arizona nonprofits. Those stories next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon. I'm Ted Simons. The Republican National Convention continues in Cleveland with candidates, delegates, and party officials looking to create a variety of narratives that inevitably get the once over twice from journalists covering the convention. For many of those reporters, a national political convention is a once-in-a-lifetime event.
Oh, I think it's great. I mean, I would even, regardless of one's political affiliations, I think it's so fascinating to attend one of these, and you really see people for whom politics is their whole life in many ways.
For a more in-depth look at what reporters go through in covering national political conventions, we welcome Mark Flatten, who worked conventions as a reporter for the East Valley Tribune. He's now an investigative journalist for the Goldwater Institute. Good to see you again. It's been a while.
Good to be back.
Yeah, you bet. Which convention did you cover? Did you cover more than one?
My first convention was, I believe, '92. It was Bill Clinton's first nomination for president. And quite frankly, that was the most exciting. I don't know if it's because it was the first one that was new or it was just kind of the last one with any mystery or suspense to it.
Yeah.
The last one I covered was the John Kerry nomination when he ran against Bush the second time.
How much did you have to prepare before going there?
You do a lot of prep work. You talk to the delegates, and that's really, I think, the most rewarding and the most valuable thing you get. It's not the politicians on stage. It's not the big speeches. It's that you really get to know these delegates, because these are, aside from sort of that upper tier of the politicos, most of the delegates are just sort of regular folks. They're people who live ordinary lives, are active in politics, and they really care about these issues. And that, frankly, is the most rewarding part about covering the conventions. So you do a lot of prep work, talking to them, getting their sense, getting a feel for what they're thinking. And that actually helps you cover not only the convention, but sort of politics going forward.
I was going to ask, because it seems like the kind of thing where you do a lot of preparation, but once you get there, some of that preparation gets thrown out the window.
The problem with covering conventions is they are so tightly scripted, and I'm not just talking about what's going on the stage. I mean, everything from the morning breakfast speaker to the evening coffee roundtable. It is so tightly scripted. They literally will give you a schedule that's down to the minute. So it's not 10:50, it's 10:43. That's I think the most challenging thing about covering the convention is kind of trying to break out of that effort of both parties to control their message and to control the narrative, because these parties are just basically big, long infomercials that drag on for 4 days. And as a reporter, what you're trying to do is find something that's off script. And it's not necessarily to embarrass, or it's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's the kind of things that you don't get from the handout or the press release or that minute-by-minute schedule. And frankly, you get that by talking to the delegates. You find out from them sort of the backroom deals that are being put together. You find out from them what segment of a particular group is dissatisfied with some of the things going on the convention floor.
Is that often at odds with the narrative that the party leaders are trying to present?
It is. A lot of times it's from sort of the top tiers. I remember at the '92 convention with Clinton, there were some folks kind of working the press crowd saying, Vinny and Lou are having this big rally at the warehouse down the road. It turned out it was a Jerry Brown rally, and he was saying that the party platform had completely ignored the labor movement.
Yeah.
So sometimes it comes from the candidates. Very often it comes from the delegates. You saw this a little bit at the Republican convention this week, when you had sort of the anti-Trump people trying to stage their little mini coup. And it's usually not that dramatic. Usually it's got something to do with the party platform. Are we strong enough on this issue? Are we too strong on that issue? So it's things like that. And again, the challenge for a reporter is to kind of get off that script, because if you just go by the schedule and the script, you're really not adding anything to the conversation. You're really not producing anything.
It almost sounds like covering the Super Bowl, which I've done once or twice here. And if you allow yourself to be kind of pushed by the tide, you don't really get much. You just get what's been preordained, and everyone in the country is getting the same thing. It seems like it's a challenge to get out there and find something new.
It is, and the difference is covering the Super Bowl, you actually don't know what's going to happen on the next play.
Well, yeah.
Covering
Well,
a convention, you know what's going to happen the next play 3 days from
Yeah,
now.
I'm talking about obviously pre-game though. I mean, the NFL has that thing so scripted before the game
Absolutely,
starts.
yeah.
You can't work. Do you get hassled? Did you get hassled by party officials, apparatchiks at these conventions you covered?
Sometimes you do. Particularly if you get some delegates that are talking off script. It's not sort of a formal candidates person comes and chews you out, but you might get kind of a stern look from the party, the state party henchmen,
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be Democrats or Republicans, for sort of going off of their script. But generally, it's not like they sort of tell you where you have to be at any given moment. They don't control where you're at per se. They control to what you have access to.
Right.
So if you want to go into the convention hall, here's your assigned seat. You go there, you sit there. It's very difficult to get out on the floor and work the delegates, which is really where a lot of the flavor and a lot of the color comes from, especially if you're covering a convention from for a local paper as opposed to a national network. You're really there to find out what your delegation is thinking and what their sort of emotions and color are at any given point in time. And there are pass after pass after pass to get through that first ring of security, then to get to the alternates, then to actually get on the convention floor. They literally had like 20-minute press passes where you could only go out on the floor for 20 minutes, and then you had to be back and turn it in. So they really do try to control access, particularly during the main events, to the floor and things like that. Now, as I say, the most productive thing about covering a convention is really sort of the off times, when you get the chance to sort of just sit and chat with delegates. No pens and notebooks out, no tape recorders running, but you really do get to know them, and you get a sense for where they're coming from and what they're feeling.
Can you bump into them at a local bar, local restaurant? Can you have a beer with them or share a steak or something like that?
Absolutely. And honestly, once you sort of get past that top tier of sort of the politicos who are always on guard, and get to the regular rank and file people, I mean, they're your neighbor, they're your friend. And they really believe in what they're doing, and they really believe in the issues that they stand for. But they're very decent people, and people who just like to share their thoughts on the issues of the day.
Nothing if not enthusiastic. Mark, good to have you here. Good to
Thank
see
you
you
for
again.
having
Thanks
me.
for joining us. We appreciate it. A new report on the lower Santa Cruz River in southern Arizona shows an improvement in water quality and an increase in the number of fish. Here with more on the report is Ian Dowdy, Program Director at the Sonoran Institute. Good to have you here. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be here, Ted.
EPA-funded report is titled A Living River. What are we talking about here?
Well, we're talking about the lower Santa Cruz River. And the Santa Cruz River, archaeologists believe, has been inhabited for the last 12,000 years, and it's an important piece of our heritage in our region. And unfortunately, over the last 50 years or so, it's been mostly dry, except for in two stretches where there's effluent, which is treated wastewater. And so in the lower Santa Cruz, we've been tracking that in partnership with Pima County, who operate the wastewater treatment facilities. They spent $600 million doing upgrades, and we've been tracking over the last 3 years some of the metrics of the river, the riparian health, the amount of area that's watered, and some other interesting things.
For those who aren't familiar, where exactly is the Santa Cruz River?
Well, the Santa Cruz River flows, it's an interesting river. It's a binational. It flows from southern Arizona into Mexico, and then it flows back into Arizona around Nogales. And so it's an interesting river because it's very binational. And so there are two stretches that we monitor. One is the effluent dependent stretch coming out of Nogales, which is the upper Santa Cruz. And then we monitor the lower Santa Cruz coming out of Tucson and flowing into Marana.
Okay, and now this is the longest stretch of effluent-dominated river water in where? Ever? At any place?
In Arizona, for sure. And it's really important because, as you probably know, before we came and settled in the Southwest, there were a lot of rivers that flowed through here. Mm-hmm. And so we have come in, we've been able to create civilizations and have been able to live and actually prosper quite well, but our rivers have not. And so stretches of the river like this one in the lower Santa Cruz that has water in it is really, really important to preserve that riparian heritage that we value.
And that is a bird watching mecca down there, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of birds, a lot of migratory birds that rely on riparian systems, the cottonwood and willow gallery forests that are basically endangered now in our region. The effluent now provides maybe the last hope for this type of forest in our area.
So let's talk about the report here looking at water quality. Let's start with that. It sounds like significant improvements here over the past, what, you said 3 years?
Yeah, over the past 3 years. We've been monitoring it since the water year 2013. That is the year that the treatment plant was upgraded. The 2 treatment plants were upgraded. And so what we found is the water is much clearer. There's much less ammonia, nitrogen in the water. So that allows the river to support more native fish, more native vegetation, and it provides a less stressed environment for the ecology of the region.
Why is the water improved? Is it simply a matter of time? I mean, has something changed as far as treatment is concerned?
Yeah, they've upgraded the plant. The water is much cleaner going into the river now.
And I read as well that because the water is a better quality, the aquifer rate, the recharge rate has improved. Explain that, please.
That's right, and it's important too. I mean, we rely in our region on any water resources that we have. And so water in this particular area and throughout other parts of Arizona, the river is the place that water is released, more out of convenience than anything else. And so we rely on that water to percolate into the aquifer so we can use it later. And so by having increased percolation rates, we now can have that water infiltrate quicker. And the hope will be that we can make an argument that water should remain in rivers like this so that we can have it for future generations, but also we can enjoy the ecology and the quality of life benefits that the river brings.
But it would stand to reason if it's percolating, if it's getting in there in the aquifer more, is the river not going, is it not flowing as far as it used to?
That's right, it's not. Yeah, in the lower Santa Cruz, the river flowed about 23 miles or farther, virtually all year round. What we found now, because the water is percolating in quicker, infiltrating quicker, we have found that the river is only flowing about 16 miles. And so there are various sections that are drying. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's because the water quality is better. When water quality is better, the clogging layer at the bottom of the river it goes away, and then the water can infiltrate in a more efficient way.
So you have to kind of strike a balance there, huh?
That's right.
Okay. Fish. Sounds like, is it more fish? Is it a wider variety of fish? A little bit of both?
It's a wider variety of fish. So we found 3 new species of fish. They're non-native fish, but we're encouraged because we recently discovered last October that the endangered Gila top minnow has returned to the upper Santa Cruz. Well, with the endangered Gila top minnow upstream now, there's an opportunity with this cleaner water for that fish to find habitat perhaps in the lower Santa Cruz. And for other native fish to find habitat in that region.
And as well, it sounds like the odor has diminished. I guess that's always a factor when you're talking about recharged water, correct?
It is.
And reclamated water.
It is. It's been a challenge for years. Anywhere around wastewater treatment plants, there tends to be an odor. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's a concern to the community. In this case, the odor rarely goes over the boundaries of the treatment facility itself.
And that's something that I guess as far as tourism is concerned, you got to watch out for that. Obviously, we talked about it being a birdwatcher's paradise, tourism there. The economic impact of the Santa Cruz River. Huge?
Well, I don't have a number, but it is big. I mean, the Sweetwater Wetlands, which is right there, it's right at the outfall of the wastewater treatment facility there. It draws bird watchers all year round, and certainly during key migration times. And so it's important to have that type of resource nearby and a place where people can enjoy it. And odor obviously is a concern, but the key is having a resource there, having the water in the river so that people can appreciate it.
And the upgrades and improvements that were made here, can these be used as models for other water areas, riparian areas, reclaimed areas?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of areas in Arizona that rely on reclaimed wastewater, a lot of rivers that do. I mean, right here in Phoenix, we have the Gila River that gets water from the 91st Avenue wastewater treatment plant. It flows some 18 miles or so through West Phoenix. Well, we can look at the information that's come out of the work here in Pima County and say this might be an opportunity for other wastewater treatment facilities in our state to realize the benefits, the ecological benefits, economic, social benefits that come from doing upgrades and ensure that rivers have a similar benefit across our state.
Well, it certainly is an encouraging report. Thank you so much for sharing it. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
You're so welcome. Thank you.
Cronkite News has the largest presence of any Arizona news organization at the national political conventions. Get full convention coverage with the uniquely Arizona perspective on Cronkite News daily at 4:30 on Arizona PBS.
Nonprofits are big business in Arizona, employing hundreds of workers and generating billions of dollars in revenue. That's according to a new report authored by our next guest, Anthony Evans from ASU's Seidman Research Institute. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. This study now, what exactly did you look at?
We looked at the economic footprint of the nonprofits statewide. It was originally an idea that came from the Phoenix Philanthropy Group in association with the Alliance of Arizona Nonprofits. We focused very much on just the employment and wages of nonprofits in the state. There are over 21,000 nonprofits, of which around 3,000 actually employ people on a full or part-time basis. So our results are really conservative. But what we came out with was around $22.4 billion gross state product contribution each year.
That's a big impact of the economy.
It's around 8% of the state's GSP.
Now, is that similar? Did I read somewhere that the tax revenue on all this was similar to retail?
The tax revenue is similar to retail, yes. I mean, we're talking about really, really significant size to the economy. 167,000 direct jobs, 7.7 billion in wages. They are significant. You know, to put it into perspective, the direct employment makes it the 5th largest non-government employer in the state.
My goodness. And again, we should mention that with $2.1 billion generated by taxes, we're talking sales, payroll, and property taxes,
yes.
Not income taxes. These are nonprofits.
There will be some income tax from the employees themselves,
yes.
But there won't be obviously from the nonprofit company.
The reports seem to indicate that this sector, this nonprofit sector, was dominated by the big boys, big hospitals especially. Talk to us about that.
That's true. I mean, they account for around 56% of the employment. But if you actually take them away, you're still talking of around $10 billion a year from the other nonprofits. So they're very small in terms of number, large in terms of employment, large in terms of gross state product. But the reality is it's such a diverse community. Say 21,000 different nonprofits stretching from human services through to arts, culture, public and societal benefit, religious groups. There's a wide variety there. So I think it would be wrong to purely focus on the health sector itself.
Right, not to focus on them, but to realize that they are the big gorilla in the corner.
They are. They're over half. They're around $12 billion.
For the little guys, seems like they're much more dependent on public donations.
Not necessarily true again. Around 27% of revenue for a non-profit comes from philanthropic contributions. Around a third comes from government revenue, but $4 in every 10 is actually raised through its own activities. So it could be events, it could be a wide range of different items that they would actually embark upon.
But for the smaller nonprofits, it's again from the report, it kind of sounded like government contracts were the big factor for the little guys.
They can be, yes. They're around a third. I mean, what we have noticed, we actually backed up our study with a survey as well. And in the survey, around 1 in 6 non-profits had actually seen a fall in the amount of government revenue over the past year. But, the good thing that you can see from this is that rather than try to cut back upon the services that they provide to the community, they actually look to try to make cost savings in-house. And I think that is the benefit of dealing with some of these smaller non-profits.
And it sounds as though, again, we're talking services, service fees, sales of goods, these sorts of things as inputting into the economy.
They're a very significant player. I think, it's important when you talk about the economic development of the state. Everyone always invites some of the main players in terms of business. They need to start thinking about inviting some of the non-profits to that table as well.
Is that not happening?
I don't think it necessarily happens, no.
Why? Is there a misconception out there?
I think, one of the reasons for actually doing this study, we were asked to do it, was to try and convey to the local powers that be the importance of the non-profits to that community.
Have non-profits rebounded from the recession?
They have slightly in terms of wages. The wages that they pay, as I say, around $7.7 billion directly to their employees, have rebounded over the past 4 years. They're back to around the 2008 level, but that's not the key message here. We're looking very much at the economic footprint, but it's conservative. We're not taking into account the social return on investment. Think about the services that these guys provide. Think about the improved health outcomes. Think about the improved just cultural aspects of living within this state. No major company, no Intel of this world would want to move here unless they felt that there was some good cultural components for their workforce to enjoy. And that's what non-profits provide. And we haven't really taken that into account in these numbers.
I was going to say, how do you take something like that into account? Is there a way to measure that?
There is a way to measure it, and we're exploring it for a subsequent study.
For your next appearance on Horizon?
Possibly, yes. We are looking at it. A number of things have happened in Europe on that front, and we'd like to try and replicate it here.
Innovation, efficiency, maybe an increase in modern business practices. Is that a factor? Is that making a difference out there in the nonprofit world?
I think very much so.
How so?
I think that, just because the term non-profit implies that they're a lesser business, that's not true. They're probably far more rigorous in terms of the way in which they go about their day-to-day activities than some of the bigger businesses. I think that, it's important to notice, to respect the contribution that the non-profit community makes to the state.
And as far as this study, how exactly was this done? We talked about how you can measure maybe the immeasurables right now, but for what you did measure in this study, how'd you do it?
21,000 non-profits in the state, of which 3,000 actually employ people. So we had data from the quarterly census of employment and wages, and our numbers are based primarily on the data from those 3,000. In addition, we had a statewide survey, and we had around 600 surveys back from throughout the state, good representation down south and up north, and we sort of melded the two together. It's a method that has been used in California. It's a method now that I believe Oregon are looking to replicate.
Interesting. All right, so we've got this idea that the impact is strong, really strong. I think stronger than most people would realize.
Definitely.
So if I'm a government official, if I'm a civic leader, what do I take from all this?
I think it's very important for them to speak to some of the bodies, the Arizona Community Foundation, to speak to the Alliance of Arizona Nonprofits, to speak to ASU Lodestar and understand the role that nonprofits make, have them at the table, and explore ways in which they can contribute to the future economic development of this state.
Are there ways that nonprofits can maybe sing their own praises a little bit louder. Are they a little bit lax in terms of that sort of thing?
I think they have been in the past. To be fair, the Arizona Community Foundation actually produced a very good media pack to enable them to utilize these results for their own endeavors. And I think we'll actually see this in the coming years.
All right. Very interesting stuff. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. We
Thank you
appreciate
very much.
it. And Wednesday on Arizona Horizon, we will take a look at a year-long program that gives students a boost in career and education. And a new report on tech talent shows Phoenix ranked number 11 in the country. Those stories at 10 on the next Arizona Horizon. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great evening.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.